Sun has obviously gone down, so these shots are a little bit dark, but you can see some blinking lights off in the distance there in St. Pete. You've got Jacksonville International Airport in the middle, Raleigh-Durham International Airport as well. Not along the coast, not anywhere in Florida, but that part of North Carolina could possibly really start to feel some impacts as we head into tomorrow as Ian starts to show up and bring rain and gusty wind and the like all across not just North Carolina, but through much of the southeast. Again, we're just showing you what the wind gusts were or are going to be in Charlotte. And so you see a bunch of planes landing in Charlotte Douglas right now. That likely won't be the case tomorrow. We could be dealing with some issues right there. This is Ian right now. A lot of dry air wrapped up in it, so it's a much more lopsided storm than it was at one point, but still plenty of rain and tropical rain at that. Look at that, 4,200 commercial flights in the air right now. We have no delays, but 1,600 cancellations. And you see Orlando, today's worst airport for cancellations, over 800 of them. Can't blame them. They saw 15 inches of rain as Ian came through. Tomorrow, well, Orlando already has 437 flights canceled and 36 delayed. And again, that's what 15 inches of rain will do on top of hellacious winds and, a hurricane tearing through your town. As we look at tomorrow, all across the southeast, it's going to be clean and green. It looks like here as we're going to reopen Jacksonville Airport. Also, Orlando reopens at noon tomorrow. And you've also got Tampa Bay reopening too. Heading into Sunday, D.C. could see some moderate delays and issues. Same with Boston as, we could be dealing with some impacts, maybe some remnants from Ian up far that north. We'll see how everything plays out. But even through the end of the weekend, Marissa, we're still going to have to keep an eye on what's going on there with Ian.
Central 140.
Right now on Fox Weather, Ian re-strengthening into a hurricane. It is eyeing another landfall. This time, however, we're talking about South Carolina. Of course, all of this playing out while Florida grappling with widespread devastation and heartbreak. Hurricane Ian making landfall in southwest Florida just yesterday afternoon as a catastrophic, incredibly strong Category 4 storm. Communities and lives forever changed as vicious storms surge. That relentless rain and strong winds just quite literally ripped buildings and homes apart.
Yeah, all that stuff just scattered in the streets, right? And that was everybody's personal stuff a couple of days ago, all probably neatly taken care of. Hey, Hurricane Ian far from over, too. The storm is a Category 1 hurricane. It was a tropical storm for a while, but it re-intensified as it went back into the Atlantic after crossing over the Florida Peninsula. We've got Charleston County in South Carolina under a state of emergency ahead of Ian's possible landfall tomorrow.
And we also have complete team coverage for you this evening. There's a look at the Fox Weather team spread out from left to right across your screen. We've got Max Gordon, Will Nunley, Katie Byrne in some of the hardest hit locations and how a lot of these communities are now trying to come back. Some just still trying to piece together their lives. I mean, we're only, 12 hours, 24 hours out from some pretty nasty weather. Hey, everybody, welcome back to Fox Weather. I'm Marissa Torres.
Yep, I'm Nick Koster. This is breaking coverage of Hurricane Ian as we continue to track it. We already tracked it as it made one landfall in the United States. It's going to make another tomorrow, and you've got a little bit more on that. It's not looking like the most healthy storm system. It's not anywhere near what it was when it made landfall in Florida. Having said that, though, it's still going to bring some big-time concerns.
Right. We're not going to see the same sort of landfall. It's lost a lot of those tropical characteristics as it hopped into the Atlantic. Remember, it weakened to a tropical storm. It reemerged out into the Atlantic, and this morning was yet again categorized as a hurricane, Category 1. There has been some interaction with a trough right about here, so that has been intensifying it, almost helping it regain some of that strength. And while it isn't true in tropical nature anymore, and you are seeing some frontal boundaries form with some more cold air interaction, it's still going to have some pretty significant impacts in terms of bringing all of that tropical moisture as well as those very strong winds. It is moving north-northeast, but we are looking at more of a westward steer tomorrow with landfall, and that pressure did drop a little bit to 984 millibars. Dropping pressure signifies an intensification and those winds go up. Winds have been gradually increasing from Hilton Head down towards Savannah. We're still looking at gusts anywhere from 20 to 40 miles per hour, so a little less than tropical storm strength, but that'll be climbing throughout the night. And by tomorrow, you could be seeing hurricane strength winds. This is a look at some of the storm reports out of the past few hours. This is a tree in the roadway reported at Deerfield Road and Bush Road. This is coming out of South Carolina, just to the north of Savannah there, so just to the north of the border. And then out of Hollywood, South Carolina, law enforcement shared pictures, it looks like, via social media of street lamps blown down along Highway 165 near Highway 162. So in the Charleston area, want to remind you, this is just the beginning. Things are going to continue to deteriorate as we head in through those overnight hours. The hurricane warning stretching out of Savannah through Charleston and through Wilmington. And we are looking at that landfall tomorrow, potentially between Charleston and Myrtle Beach sometime during the middle part of the day. Nick.
All righty, let's talk about Fort Myers, Florida, and what it looked like a day ago. That storm surge is, well, frankly, unreal. I mean, watch that structure right in front of you there, kind of on the left side of the screen. As this video gets going, notice that's a house, and it's moving its position there, kind of now being cut in half by that telephone pole, and now almost completely on the other side of that telephone pole. So yeah, it's no longer in the same spot it was before Ian came on shore, and one of just many hundreds of, maybe even thousands of homes that were completely shifted or took on just a little bit of damage. 240 storm reports over the last couple of days across the Sunshine State, a lot of them over here. And you notice that little blip of red right there, that was actually an EF2 tornado that happened before Ian made landfall. Matter of fact, here it is. You see that path right there, 6 miles from Boca Raton to just to the west of Delray Beach. Maximum width on that tornado was 200 yards. So to put that in layman's terms, we're talking about a tornado the size of 2 football fields that traveled 6 miles down the road. And again, that was nothing. That paled in comparison to Ian then a day later. 140 mile per hour wind recorded in Cape Coral. Devastating. 135 in Punta Gorda. Even that 112 in Pelican Bay is just howling wind. The eye tracked right here, and so the eye wall is responsible for that real stripe of heavy rain that you see going right through the central portion of the state, right to the north of Fort Myers, and then right into Daytona Beach. Matter of fact, Daytona Beach area there saw 1.5 to 2 feet of rainfall. And look at these totals. Titusville actually is on the top of the list there at over 25 inches of rain. Northport over 19 inches. Union Park's over 16 and a half. And then Orlando, which is where many people went to get away from Ian, saw 15 inches of rain. All right, well, Cape Coral, we just mentioned, had that 140 mile per hour wind gust. That's one area completely devastated by Hurricane Ian's very gusty winds. Residents are returning to their community completely unrecognizable at this hour. Fox Weather's Will Nunley has more.
It's those who can get back come back to see a scene of disbelief. I mean, they cannot understand what they are seeing in terms of the level of destruction that's been left behind here. But there's also a little bit of desperation sinking in for all parts of this community, because keep in mind, there is a curfew in place for many areas. The power is out to a majority of this city. So you can't easily find fuel. You can't find it hardly at all. When you do come across a gas station,
10397.
The stores are not open. The hotels that were sheltering many people who were trying to evacuate from areas like I'm standing on here on Cape Coral are now learning that those hotels have to shut down and can no longer accept anybody. You can't stay there because there's no electricity and no running water. And so this just leads to more and more desperation for people trying to find answers, trying to find day-to-day solutions for themselves in these moments after storms like this. But from the neighbors that have come back here tonight to where, I'm standing here at Metlache in Cape Coral, they are seeing their entire neighborhood transformed. There are roads that are gone, of course, bridges that are gone, but waterways carved into the landscape where they weren't before. I was speaking to some firefighters this afternoon, and trying to get a sense from them. Do they feel like they have a grasp on this situation yet? And they answered me honestly and said, no, it's still so chaotic in these hours after something like this. This is unprecedented for this community. And they're still trying to really get in here, understand the totality of people that need to be rescued, trying to account for people, and then try to go door to door with scenes like this to make sure that no one is trapped inside. They're all doing the best they can. But this is a tremendous effort that's underway right now, and this is not something that we are going to get a lot of answers on in the immediate term. It may be days before we truly understand the loss of life and the toll that this has taken in terms of property damage for these areas. And this is just one example. The video that we're showing you from this area is just one example of dozens of these coastal communities that are in the same boat. And that's not factoring in now what's happening in real time in Orlando and places on the eastern coast of Florida. It's just incredible to think about how massive this storm was, an emergency that has encompassed this entire state, and now with its sight set on Georgia, South Carolina, and as you mentioned, possibly even North Carolina. Just a lot to try to comprehend with the totality of this storm.
All right, Will, thank you so much for that. And we do want to take it now to our Katie Byrne, who is in St. Augustine, Florida. We are talking about rescues that have been underway across the state. And Katie, we just came from the West Coast, the Gulf Coast. A little bit different story as we head to the East Coast. And even now as we see Ian churning out in the Atlantic, are you still feeling some of those impacts, or at least some of the wind, as you head into tonight?
Marissa, it really feels like it's been dying down for the last few hours. We are still dealing with some rain, but you can see it's more of a misting now. But you could see crazy video in this area earlier. It looks like now in the same location. So let's take a look at what that looks like now. I think this gives some people some peace of mind, because I've seen a lot of people on Twitter really concerned about this area. I want you to know the water has receded, and it's been receding ever since about 8 o'clock tonight. So a lot of those areas in the downtown historic neighborhood of St. Augustine that were underwater earlier today are no longer underwater, and that's great news for people who were concerned about this area. It is very quiet here. I think a lot of people, there were voluntary evacuation orders in this area at the beach and in the downtown area of St. Augustine, so some people took those warnings and decided not to stay because it is so quiet. Buildings and homes are boarded up, sandbags against people's windows and doors. But there's video of the same location from earlier when high tide happened earlier in the day, and you could see just how fast the water came crashing over the seawall there. And we had a storm surge peaking at 3 feet. And what happened was that water came over and filled up this intersection that was right next to that seawall. And then that water went rushing into the downtown area, which is right next door. And what happened was a lot of these downtown areas of this town, the buildings are very close together and small. So officials were worried about people driving through and trying to sightsee, see what was going on. And they were worried that the people are going to be creating a wake, and that wake would then send water rushing into homes and businesses. So that was a concern. Of course, it's always a concern for people not to be driving in water like that. You don't want to drive through standing water, flooded water, or a storm surge. So that's the warnings from officials. Of course, now things have been dying down, but we are staying up to date on what's been happening. They've gotten over 7 inches of rain here today. And earlier, when we were downtown for most of the afternoon and early evening, we were looking back, and I said, I feel like we've got to check these wind gust speeds at 8 o'clock. And I talked to our Greg Diamond about what we were seeing at that time. 63 miles per hour is the strongest wind gust we had all day. And I said it felt like we were actually in a wind tunnel. It's crazy thinking about that compared to the types of wind speeds that our Robert Ray and Will Nunley experienced over on the West Coast. But, things are different from the West Coast to the East Coast, and flooding can look a lot different from the Atlantic to the Gulf. So that's what we're going to be watching tonight as Ian continues to move over towards Jacksonville. Marissa?
And Katie, let me ask you, we were actually tallying up the nights. I mean, everything began to deteriorate in Florida Monday night, working its way right from south to north. You're in one of the remaining areas with some minor impacts at this point. Are they loosening some of the advice for people in terms of getting out, and maybe people, if they need to get out tonight, they're welcome to do so? Or are they still saying, hey, hunker down one more night and then we're done?
42 TAE 4.
Well, I checked in with police an hour ago or so, and they were telling me no curfew tonight, so no official rules as far as that goes, and the evacuation orders that were here were voluntary. So what we started to see around 8 o'clock when the water was receding, a lot of cars coming in to see what happened, and a lot of that was just onlookers trying to see the damage, but some of that was people checking on their businesses, checking on their homes. So I think people maybe came over here around dinner time, came to make sure everything was okay, and then went back to where they were staying until the storm is fully out of the way.
Yeah, human nature just to be curious, and I think a lot of folks getting that cabin fever at this point. All right, Katie Byrne, thank you so much from St. Augustine, Florida.
Johnson
Do you want to check
and
in
James
now with meteorologist Jane Menard about, Ian's not done yet, Jane, and it's going to continue on this path.
That's right. I mean, you're taking a look at video out of Naples, Florida. This was power lines that came down, sparking those fires, those flames there. Really not a sight that you want to see, but the power of these winds in some places, in some communities, I mean, power poles just completely removed. And so it's going to take some time for utility crews to get into these communities there. And so we still have over 2 million people in the dark tonight. And that number, while it is very slowly trending down, is going to be something that we're watching for very closely. 2.2 million on the docket right now. Hardy County taking the top of the list with nearly 99% of the county in the dark. We are seeing Charlotte County, Lee County, of course, Fort Myers, Sarasota.
Save big money with 11% off everything at Menards. Keep your outdoor tools, supplies, and valuables secure and protected with Suncast Storage Sheds. The 8-foot by 10-foot Tremont outdoor shed is low maintenance and has reinforced construction for added strength and stability, while the hinges and lockable handles add extra security. All Suncast Storage Sheds are 11% off right now at Menards. Big money at
Menards. Say 1,000 power turned back on for customers, but we are going to see that slow trend, and it is going to be slow. What I want to get to now is power that still has yet to go out for our friends up in, say, Georgia, coastal Carolinas, because this is going to be something that will happen in the next 24 hours. And so now's the time to prepare, make sure that our medications are in order. Whenever I think of power outages, and I think of my sister, she's a type 1 diabetic, and so she has to keep her insulin, refrigerated. I'm sure there are many people like you at home who have those same concerns, whether it be for yourself or for your family members. And so putting those plans in place, in action, make sure you do have those generators ready to go in a safe place. We take a look at South Carolina outage trends right now, and I'm watching this very closely. This number is very slowly beginning to tick up in a few counties. We do have some outer rain bands beginning to impact the coastline, and with that, we do have a few isolated wind gusts, wind gusts up to tropical storm force. And so for now, we are anticipating things to be pretty quiet, but you can see that trend goes well up by the time we get into the afternoon on Friday, and that's when we are anticipating that landfall of Ian. Generator safety, real quickly, let's break it down. You want to make sure that that generator is about 20 feet away from your home or business. Of course, outside of that business, you don't want to have a generator indoors. Very dangerous. Make sure those vents are pointed away from your home, too, because it's going to exhaust all of the toxins. You don't want to breathe that in. Make sure that equipment is plugged directly into the generator, and you are just kind of prioritizing what the generator is being used for. Things like perhaps maybe a refrigerator to keep those medications on ice. Marissa.
Yeah, Jane, all things people have to think about, right? And it could be some time till power comes back on. As Jane talked about, Florida, they're trying to get out there and restore things, but you saw in some spots it looks like a bomb went off. I mean, the devastation is going to be hard to sort through. So just planning for a worst case scenario. And Jane was talking about those outer rain bands as well, and you'll notice Charleston seeing some of that rain over towards Florence as you take it into North Carolina through the Outer Banks. So the rain is coming now. It does look like a lot of the thunderstorms are offshore, but I'm not sure for how much longer. The center of Ian just to the south and east here, and you'll notice the heavier spots of rain are going to start to creep in towards Savannah, Georgia. So Ian is just offshore there. Charleston, the impacts could be quite dangerous, if not life-threatening. The storm surge 4 to 7 feet. You have high tide tomorrow at noon, and it's midday tomorrow. We expect landfall somewhere, it's looking as of now, between Charleston and Myrtle Beach. Now, that could change, and any little steering by the way of landfall is going to impact storm surge as we saw in Florida. But be ready for worst case scenario here. You're going to have tropical storm to hurricane force winds tomorrow